Across Asia, demand for transport infrastructure is rising as rapidly as the economies it supports. And for millions of people, mobility shapes everyday life. For the OPEC Fund, infrastructure is about more than moving people from one place to another. It is about bringing people closer to what matters most. That is why the OPEC Fund has committed $5.4 billion to transport infrastructure since 1976. In India, the OPEC Fund is helping finance Mumbai Metro Line 5, easing congestion and improving daily travel for more than 500,000 commuters, making journeys faster, safer, and more reliable across one of the world's busiest cities.
It's more convenient to travel by metro rather than on roads. It's more safer also.
It's very important to feel safe whenever or wherever you're going, and I don't feel that safety when I'm traveling via local or a train as compared to traveling via metro. It's very safe.
In Vietnam's Vinh Phuc province, the Dam Vac Bridge transformed how two communities reach one another. With OPEC Fund support, what was once a long and difficult journey across the lake became a direct, everyday connection, giving people easier access to schools, markets, services, and livelihoods.
Trước khi chưa có cây cầu thì bọn con sẽ rất mệt khi đi đường vòng và đi một quãng đường rất xa, tốn rất nhiều thời gian ạ. Khi cây cầu được xây dựng thì bọn con sẽ được đi một quãng đường sẽ gần hơn và có thể.
Ngày xưa là chưa có cây cầu này là tôi đi lên thăm họ hàng anh em ở trên đấy thì là tôi phải đi vòng mất 6-7 cây số. Có những lúc mà đi vòng ở dưới kia lại còn phải đi xe đạp, nó đi bộ chưa có thuận lợi như bây giờ. Nhưng bây giờ tôi chỉ có đi 5-10 phút là tôi đến nơi thôi.
Across Asia, infrastructure is helping shorten distances, open new pathways, and bring regions closer together. Because the true value of infrastructure is not measured only in roads, railways, or bridges. It is measured in time saved, in safer journeys, and in everyday life made easier.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to parallel session number 4 on financing next generation infrastructure. I'm Melinda Crane. I am an independent journalist with a background in political economy, law, and development, and it's a great honor to accompany you today as moderator. And may I just say, it's an especial pleasure to be here in this room because it's the coolest one in the Hofburg. So hope everybody's enjoying that. We are holding a panel on what is one of the most defining challenges in Asian development finance. The numbers are striking. Asia's infrastructure financing gap runs into trillions of dollars annually. Governments across the region are working with ambitious national agendas to close that gap, but public budgets alone cannot come close to the scale that's required. The gap is not new, but its impact and its dimensions are changing with the rising importance of digital connectivity. And what is new, and what makes this session timely, is the degree to which financial architecture itself is evolving. And we heard about this in our opening plenary today from President Al Khalifa, among others. Blended finance, risk-sharing mechanisms, capital market instruments, South-South collaboration, all of them open pathways that didn't exist a decade ago. Our outstanding panel brings together a very wide range of perspectives. Our title is Connecting Communities, a reminder that infrastructure isn't an end in itself, and we heard that just now in our film, and we saw it at the beginning of President Khalifa's speech in that bridge that allowed a young girl to go to school safely. Infrastructure is about connecting communities so that individuals in those communities can take part in social and economic life. And I know we will be bringing that point in our discussion with our panel. I now have the great honor to introduce them, and I'll ask them to please take their seats on the stage as I introduce them, starting with His Excellency Longpo Leki Dorji. He is Minister of Finance of the Royal Government of Bhutan, currently overseeing, amongst other endeavors, the Dorjilung Hydroelectric Power Project, Bhutan's largest infrastructure project ever. And he has described the financing infrastructure as enabling transformational infrastructure investment without unduly burdening public finances, and that's what we'll hear about later on. It's also a great pleasure to welcome Ms. Sabina Qureshi. She is Additional Secretary at Pakistan's Ministry of Economic Affairs, responsible for managing external economic assistance and coordinating partnerships with multilateral and bilateral institutions. Pakistan does have one of the most extensive development finance partnership networks in all of Asia across a large and complex infrastructure portfolio that I know we'll hear more about in just a moment. So, Madam Qureshi, please. It's a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Khalid Kadori. He is Vice President, Private Sector at the OPEC Fund for International Development, leading its work, supporting commercially viable infrastructure projects on a scale that governments cannot undertake directly in areas from renewable energy to logistics and digital corridors. The latter includes finance for digital infrastructure in Central Asia, including a landmark data center in Uzbekistan. So hopefully we'll hear more shortly. Please, that's your seat. And finally, Ms. Jeanne So is Managing Director and Head of Structured Finance Asia at SMBC, which is the Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, one of the most active commercial lenders in Asian infrastructure and project finance. And she brings deep expertise supporting countries as they navigate the energy transition and has been a consistent voice in regional fora on what it takes to mobilize private capital at scale. So many thanks to you and to all of you for being with us today. So I'd like to start out with an overview of the architecture of cooperation, because Asia's infrastructure financing gap isn't a question of ambition. The ambition is clearly there. It'd be wonderful if everybody would put their mobiles on mute if you haven't done so. Thank you. It's also a question, of course, of structures and mechanics. Who does what, with what instruments, and in what combination? And I want to start by establishing those distinct roles of the different actors, beginning with the view from a government that has had to be particularly inventive in how it finances development. Your Excellency, Minister Dorji, Bhutan has pursued an approach to infrastructure financing that deliberately combines public resources, multilateral support, and private investment to deliver at scale while protecting scarce fiscal resources. What does that model look like in practice? Can you perhaps share a few examples and what are the most important lessons that you have learned in making this work? It's on.
Thank you. First of all, my name is Leki Dorji. I'm a Minister for Finance for a very small country called Bhutan. Bhutan, to introduce a little bit, is a small country, landlocked, and located in the eastern ranges of the Himalayas. We have just graduated from the least developed country category in the end of December 2023. But we are one of the a few carbon negative countries in the world. We take great pride in doing that, and we work consciously towards, we have actually committed to remain carbon neutral forever. But of course, we are making a lot of sacrifices to do that. And now, although as a very small country, we have great ambitions. We have always propagated what's called cross-national happiness. This is a concept that when all your development efforts should not just be economic progress.
Minister, I'm going to ask you to lift your microphone a little bit higher because we're getting a bit of feedback. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, that's so that economic progress. With that, we want to, promote and preserve your culture, and then the most important one is, of course, to preserve your environment. Now, after graduating from the LDC at the end of December 2023, then we find that that the concessional financing is not in abundance, and the ODA it's also shrinking. So there's a lot of pressure. So we have been working towards how to finance our infrastructure projects, and also we have also come up with very ambitious projects in terms of develop. We said that we want to double our GDP. By 2029, we want to double our GDP, and by 2034, we want to quadruple that. And we are also working on what we call 10x, 10 times economic fall. And I think it's possible because our base is very small. I think our GDP is probably smaller than many of the family offices in Europe or in other places. But I think that's not the fact. So then currently we are working on 13 five-year plan, and then with the help of this Climate Vulnerability Forum, we have come up with our climate prosperity plan, with that Bhutan resource mobilization plan. And through that, we are trying to come up with the project plans and infrastructure projects and how to finance that. And of course, Bhutan, we don't have much choices in terms of our economy. So hydropower, developing hydropower is one of our very important, besides the tourism, hydropower is very important for us. So hydropower development has been key to developing our infrastructure. Previously, we have always done hydropower development through government-to-government cooperation with the government of India. But now, I think slowly we are moving towards capital stacking, where we try to invite private sector and make it more affordable for them in terms of making the blended finance, mixing the finances from multilateral banks, the finances through concessional lending, all those things. And so we try to make it more affordable for the private sectors. It becomes more attractive for them. So that's how we are trying to do it. But of course, it's easier said than done, because we need to de-risk, because those big companies, they will not feel comfortable if you have to, not make it very affordable. So basically, we do it through public resources and through external grant, through multilateral support, through the banks. We work closely with the World Bank, through the IFC, and IBRD, through IDA, and through MIGA. And of course, we have recently started working with OPEC fund, OPEC fund for the hydropower. But all our debts had always been focused on those projects which are viable. We don't take loans for our recurrent budgets, or for things that are not bringing the viable investment. And debt financing, so basically, and then other one is now private investment, and to facilitate private investment, we have Fiscal Incentives Act. We are trying to do that. And then lastly, of course, we have recently have this renewable energy taxation waiver, so that for the actual inputs to building this infrastructure, we give tax incentives. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll come back to a number of those points and instruments a little bit later on. Let's go now from the small, landlocked kingdom of Bhutan to one of Asia's largest and most complex economies, a very different scale, but a shared constraint in terms of public resources. Additional Secretary, Pakistan is pursuing a very ambitious infrastructure agenda that far exceeds what any single partner could manage and finance on its own. Tell us a little bit about how you build the right financing mix, again, that architecture, and what is the government doing to attract both development finance and private sector engagement? It's on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. A very good afternoon and assalamu alaikum to all the delegates. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And I would like to congratulate from this forum to the OPEC Fund for its 50th anniversary. Coming back to the question, I think, as you know, Pakistan is one of the most populous countries, not only in Asia, but around the world. And it is also one of the most climate vulnerable countries. So the development needs are huge and the resources are scarce. So in that very perspective, our country also relies on external economic assistance to fulfill its needs for its ever-growing population. The geographic location that Pakistan enjoys, it's not only meeting the needs of its country, but also across the region to assist and help the landlocked countries to provide access to ports, through highways, through ports. So that puts an additional requirement for financing and looking for avenues. Moreover, there is, due to the official development assistance, there's a trend that it is declining. So we have to look for innovative solutions rather than relying only on development assistance from our development partners, which have been very helpful, be it the multilateral banks, the Islamic Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, World Bank, OPEC Fund, and other entities. So we have to look for other avenues, and the government has made a financing strategy in which we mobilize financing through raising the bonds, through equity, through public-private partnership, and again through and accessing the funds through even through the climate funds, different avenues. This connectivity in the infrastructure is very important, and it's a priority for the government. So it's a huge investment. It not only is essential for building roads and ports, but also for productivity, resilience, export-led growth, trade, energy security, digital access, and regional integration. So, like I said, that we look at different avenues, infrastructure investments, and we look at this blend. Unfortunately, the window for concessional lending for developing countries is very small. Most of the time, the loans are on very hard terms and conditions, the lending. Concessional lending window is small. We have seen also that sometimes pledges are made, but they do not mature to commitments, and if it commitments, then they are not timely dispersed. So that adds additional burden on the national exchequer, and we have to finance the infrastructure projects from our own resources. This is the reason that the diversification and having a blended financing, concessional lending, going for private sector, public-private partnership, investments. So there's a whole mix that the government is presently pursuing.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Khadouri, the OPEC Fund operates across both sovereign and private sector financing. Talk to us a little bit about how those two windows play different roles and at the same time also complement one another. So what does the private sector window look like in practice when it comes to infrastructure? Maybe you have examples that you can share with us. And how does it then fit together with the public sector piece?
Thank you, Melinda, and it's a pleasure, Your Excellency, the Additional Secretary, and John, to be on the panel with you. Actually, feeds on very well to what the Additional Secretary was just saying. We're seeing that there is a lack of concessional funding for governments. You mentioned it at the onset, Melinda, how infrastructure and how you look at infrastructure has changed. The OPEC fund, the shareholders saw this change in 1998 and established our private sector window. So since then, it's grown to 10 billion out of our 32 billion commitments, and over 40% of our book right now is in infrastructure. But it's going back to exactly what you said, what is infrastructure? It has gone beyond looking at projects on a standalone basis, and it's looking at the connectivity. And as the OPEC fund, back to your question about the sovereign and the private, the sovereign team is there to make sure we have that enabling environment. The phase that Bhutan's going through now, there to support the government at their initial stages of growth as they move and as they go forward. You then have countries such as Pakistan that's taken that step, where we have come in back in 2011, I believe, on a wind farm that was privately sector-led. So you see that the private sector is a crucial part of what we do, but it's an ecosystem between the private sector and the public sector. And as the colleagues mentioned, and it was mentioned this morning, if they're not working together, then you're not going to bring long-run sustainable infrastructure. Because you've seen it many times, you have piecemeal infrastructure that's maybe created, but might be stranded. So as the OPEC fund, we have this holistic view coming in to help our partners to take it from A to Z and the complementarity between private and public. To give you some examples, for example, in Bangladesh, we've done over 1.3 gigawatts in the private sector in the energy space. Or more recently, we financed the first utility wind farm in Azerbaijan. But none of that, the private sector, wouldn't have been done if it wasn't for our sovereign teams helping create that enabling environment. So I wouldn't look at them separately. It's completely complementary. And that's where we need to continue looking as MDBs, especially working with our partner countries.
In our preceding panel here in this room before lunch, when we were looking at cities, we heard the words integration and alignment coming up again and again to describe exactly what you just talked about. So clearly those are key parts of this architecture, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I'd like to stay now with the question of the private sector and come to a commercial banking perspective, because private capital, as we just heard, doesn't move automatically, even when policy frameworks are strong and amenable. Ms. So, mobilizing private capital for infrastructure does remain a tough challenge in development finance. So from your experience working across the region, what conditions have made the biggest difference when private investment has moved? What does it take, and what does that tell you about where efforts need to focus in future?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. I think it's also, I'm glad that we'll be able to provide commercial bank perspective to infrastructure financing in Asia. Just to put things in context, Asia is not a single market. So we have ASEAN, we have South Asia, and we have East Asia like Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China. So each country has its own infrastructure model, has its own policies and its own framework. So we are actually looking at a very diverse market with very different ambition. I think one of the key challenge, I would say, for Asia remains as, like any private capital, I think fundamentally they are looking at this few factors across all the region: predictability, bankability, and scalability. So I think for Asia, one of the key challenge is therefore having bankable projects. I think in certain Asian economies, I will use the word lack of political will, because lack of clear government policies and framework, it is difficult to have a bankable project. So we always say that there's no lack of private capital. So so long as you have a bankable project, you will be able to mobilize capital into those projects. So that remains as the key challenge for Asia. And working across different countries and different projects, I think once you have a certain a framework in place, we are able to unlock opportunities together with NDBs. I think there are projects which probably are still marginally bankable. So the role of MDBs are very critical because they are able to provide credit enhancement, which includes concessional capital or longer tenor, credit enhancement, which makes the project more bankable from commercial lenders' perspective. So with that, that partnership is important, and we have financed many projects using that public-private partnership model.
Thank you very much. So let us now do a second round of exchange and go deeper on the specifics of sectors, financial instruments, and tools, because I think the new architecture of cooperation and its merits become most visible when we see how it's working to support concrete projects on the ground. And Minister Dorji, you mentioned hydropower. It is the centerpiece of Bhutan's development and export strategy, exporting power. The Dorjilong project illustrates that shift. I mentioned it in your introduction. And in fact, you told us that you did something different. You moved away from government-to-government financing arrangements toward a commercially structured model that brings in partners such as Tata Power, for example. How does Bhutan position itself to attract independent power producers and private investment? And what enabling conditions and or reforms did you put in place before that?
Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, hydropower has always been the backbone of our Bhutan's economy. And as of now, we have roughly about 3.5 gigawatt of hydro clean energy. And we have made this ambitious plan that by 2040, we want to put 20,000 megawatt of electricity, renewable energy by then. And to do this, I think we have made a lot of plans and programs. And like you mentioned, I think Dorjilong is one of the very important projects that we have been working with the World Bank Group. World Bank Group is spearheading that, and it's going to cost us about 1.7 billion US dollars. But that will actually be financed through sort of like a blended finance, where IDA is involved for about $300 million, and 150 million being the grant and 150 million concessional. Then we have also through IBRD, and then majority of them will be through the IFC, which is spearheading this. And out of this, I think Tata Power in India is going to be the shareholder. 40% ownership will be Tata Power, and we are working towards that. For Tata Power, it is attractive because this, because we always work through concessional agreement with the government. We give a lot of concessions, like I mentioned, through terms of taxes and through so many other things. And of course, before we actually even build, we also have a long-term power purchasing agreement, because Bhutan being very small, we cannot, at one time, we were actually exporting 76% of our energy to India and neighboring countries, through India to neighboring countries. Right now, of course, we see energy as more of a raw material for our industry. So we now actually need a lot more power than what is, but energy security is one of our main concerns. So that's why Dorjilong is very important for us. And for a project like Dorjilong to come, so Dorjilong, then we have so many other projects. We have already identified Dorjilong. Tata Power is going to develop 5,000 megawatt. Then Adani Group is going to develop another 500 megawatt. Then we have GMR and so many other. Right now we have been mostly working with India, because power offtake has to be in India. So, and for this to happen, I think we think that it's also attractive for the investors, the foreign direct investors, because there's a sovereign backing, and revenue predictability is there because you have a long-term power purchasing agreement. Second one, of course, the carbon negative operations. These are like renewable energy, carbon negative, Bhutan being a very carbon negative country. So these are through ESG projects. So you can also get carbon credits for those. And the other one is, of course, sustainable development has been one of our key focus of our development for a very long time. So this is also through sustainable development, because although our debts go up because of this, but then it's always sustainable, because all repaying by itself through the funds itself. And other one is like regional economic integration. Like Bhutan's economy is tightly integrated with India, and India, of course, is a huge market. So there's a huge market. They have a lot of solar energy, but hydro energy is needed to balance the grid. So it's a mutually beneficial for both the countries. And through India, regional integration to South Asia and Southeast Asia is possible. And as for the independent power producer, we have been facilitating them through this. Previously, it has always been through government-to-government contract, but now I think more of public-private partnership, government facilitating them. Of course, we always keep the majority. 60% is always maintained right now, and then the other partner takes about 40%. And the Ministry of Finance, the Royal Government of Bhutan, facilitates this through taxes and concession agreements and facilitating them through so many other ways. So this is how we have been approaching this stacking of capital.
Thank you very much. And I think in terms of the enabling framework, you hit on a number of factors that essentially add up to predictability and reliability. And interestingly enough, decarbonization policies that stay in place are clearly part of that. And you're telling us, I think, as well, and we heard this a bit from Mia Motley this morning, that sustainable development programs that are credible and that show that, in fact, human capital, as a term I'm a little ambivalent about, but that human development is at the center of the government strategy, are now beginning to be seen as part of that reliability and predictability framework. So thank you very much for that. Let me go to Additional Secretary Qureshi once again. You have major infrastructure projects across a number of different sectors. Just to name two, hydropower as well at the Mohman Dam and the Hyderabad Sukur motorway, both currently underway, and very complex projects, big complex projects. What does it take to structure projects of that kind of complexity? That was another word that came up several times in the opening plenary today. And how is Pakistan working with development partners to get such projects across the line?
Thank you. Both Mohman Dam project and Sakar Hyderabad motorway, which is commonly known as M6 project, both are being co-financed by the OPEC fund. These projects are very important. They have a place in the national priority, and these are transformative projects. Just to mention the M6 project, it is basically the connectivity project which completes the missing link between the north and south corridor. From the city Peshawar, which is borders Afghanistan, to Karachi, which is adjacent to the Arabian Sea. So it is an opening for not only transportation, but also for trade, economic activity, and these also run parallel to, they supplement, in fact, the two other regional connectivity projects, that is the CPEC, which is China-Pakistan Economic Project, and the ADB-funded CAREC project, which is Central Asia Regional Integration Project. So in that way, since this is a supplement to that, and the missing link was there for long. Yes, it was complex to look for financing, but I think that with the support of our partner, the OPEC fund, we have been able to initiate the process, and it will be signed soon, and it will be ready for its implementation, connecting both the north-south corridor within Pakistan.
Thank you. And Mr. Khadouri, as I mentioned at the outset, Asia's infrastructure gap isn't new, but we are seeing new approaches to closing it, including most especially from the OPEC fund. So tell us a little bit how you would describe what's distinctive about the OPEC fund's approach to bridging that gap.
Thank you, Melinda. And let me add some numbers to the quantum. So it's estimated that in developing Asia, the infrastructure needs are about 1.7 trillion per year up to 2030. Now let's look at it from the other side. So at the OPEC fund, we have a syndications desk. We talk to investors. It's exactly what was being said before. It's about perception, right? Our role as MDBs is, and as the OPEC fund, is how do we bridge that gap between perceived risk and the actual risk? Because you have institutional investors who are sitting on over 100 trillion in assets globally. They're looking for strong risk-return profiles. Studies have shown that in developing markets, emerging markets, your risk-return profiles can be even better than what we know in developed markets. So this is exactly where MDBs need to step in. We need to bring not just financing, it's bringing in confidence to enable that financing to come in. As you mentioned earlier, we can't do this alone as MDBs. So we need to be able to bring in that confidence. So as the OPEC fund, I think we bring in three distinct features that we can have. First is our very country-centric approach. We're really country and client-driven. We work with our partners according to their needs and where they are in development. With Bhutan, we're very excited that we'll start working in the private sector soon, where in Pakistan we've been working there for 15 years. So I think that's number one. We follow the needs of what our partner countries have. I think second is our agility and responsiveness. We're able to react quickly to changing circumstances. You know, soon after the conflict broke out recently, we launched our E-Star initiative, helping build resilience. So we have that agility and responsiveness. And then I think crucially, in what we'll be discussing today, is the full suite of products. You know, going from the project preparation to the enabling environment, to the newer tools which are extremely important, such as capital mobilization, which we launched a few years ago, blended finance, which we only recently launched as well. So we really offer to our partners that full suite, and that's the distinct role we bring in.
Thank you very much. And such an important point about the risk perception as opposed to what you might say the objective data. This is a problem that I encounter often in discussions around energy. Energy in much of the global south, still with risk premia that absolutely don't correspond to the actual potential benefits offered. And clearly, that is where you go in and try to work on closing that subjective risk perception. So many thanks for that. Let me go to Madam So now. And beyond traditional project finance lending, commercial banks are increasingly deploying innovative structured finance instruments to recycle capital and also to scale their infrastructure exposure. How do you see those tools evolving in Asia, and what conditions need to be in place for them to work at the scale that this region requires? We just heard that staggering number there from Mr. Khadouri.
Yeah. I think the infrastructure investment number of 1.7 trillion annually, I think that is real. And I think Asia remains still having the largest infrastructure gap, unfortunately. We are definitely looking beyond the traditional project finance type of structure. Why? Because the economies are transitioning, they are transforming. We are pivoting away from fossil fuel to green energy. So in the past, we will look at fossil fuel financing. They are large scale, they are complex, and they require a lot of structure around that. But what we are seeing now in the Asia economies is a lot of green energy development. You have your solar, your wind, your battery. And they are actually much smaller in size. I mean, you are looking at 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt of onshore solar, onshore wind project. So many times, if you finance it on a deal-by-deal basis, they may not be the most efficient. So we have to look at more innovative type of financing. So in the recent years, to address this efficiency, economy of scale, we have definitely looked at more innovative sort of financing, like platform financing or portfolio financing, where we sort of bundle many of these small projects together and finance them. So unlike in the past, we look at more structured PF type of financing. So with that, we are able to, of course, finance a few projects together. So that sort of give them economy of scale as well. The other type of financing that we are also seeing a lot in the market now is, of course, on the whole co-financing, where because of certain limitation of financing on the OPCO level, commercial lenders are more open or more flexible to look at it, one step removed. So again, that is also another type of structure which we see in the Asia market. And just to address not on the project level, but also supporting the smaller economies or smaller companies to promote green energy or promote social value creation. We have also been using a lot of blended finance. So we have been working with many of the local banks, like in Vietnam and Cambodia, where we mobilize a blended finance structure. So we co-finance with MDBs to the local banks, where the local banks will then be able to on-lend to the smaller industries and like women-led businesses or green industries. Because the size of the loan is small, it's not possible for commercial bank or MDBs to do it by themselves. So we utilize this, what we call the two-step loan or blended finance structure, to reach to a bigger group of companies that requires the financing. So these are the few trends that we see in the market in Asia.
And very interesting trends indeed, and some of them even 5-10 years ago inconceivable. So real change there. Let's now talk a little bit more about partnerships, because as important as some of these tools are and how well designed they are, they only work if the institutional relationships around them are effective enablers. So, Your Excellency, Bhutan has deepened partnerships with development finance institutions, including the OPEC Fund, as we heard, to finance critical infrastructure. Simultaneously, you are embarking on a project that I found very intriguing. It's the Galephu Mindfulness City. What does an effective partnership look like from a small country's perspective, and what would you ask of the international development community to better support nations like Bhutan in accessing the finance that they need for transformative priorities like Galephu?
Thank you. Thank you. This Galephu Mindfulness City, what you mentioned, is something that I personally cannot fathom, because this is like, if you look at how Dubai or how Singapore transformed from a country from third world to the first world in over a very short time. I think it's because they had the leaders who was able to, think big. And I think that Galephu Mindfulness City is a vision of our King, His Majesty King Jigme. And this is a special administrative region, not just building a new city, but a special administrative region where you will have a separate executive, legislation, and judiciary, separate from rest of Bhutan. And we have what we call diamond strategy. You start with one country, two system, to one country, one system at a later stage. That's the final goal. And then this Galephu Mindfulness City, this city actually borders the state of Assam in India, and this will, we envisage that this will become a gateway to some 2 billion people, 2 billion market in the region. And the business environment and the laws have been taken from that had worked in Singapore, that has worked in Dubai. So it's common law from Singapore and the market regulations from Dubai. And for that to happen, I think my understanding is that I think when we work with the multilateral development banks or our partners, I understand that they have to understand our context. What worked in Singapore or what worked in other countries may not work in Bhutan. So I would request that you understand our context. Second one, of course, is flexibility and tailored solutions. The one size fits all doesn't work for the banking. So I think you have to see, that understand the culture, how it works. I think is very important. Flexibility and tailored solution. So we recommend you offer flexible and responsive capital, moving away from the rigid financing structure. I think it's very important. I think, of course, I know she's smiling because that's how banks are doing now, you know. The most even commercial banks, the MDBs are doing just that. And we prioritize partnerships over projects. Sometimes these projects, I think, important to prioritize our partnerships, to coordinate and harmonize funding, because sometimes if you just look at one portion, your portion, and then others, if you don't see it as a together, you know, that it fails. So we would request that you coordinate and harmonize the funding. See that as a big project. You don't see as a, when you look at this palace, you don't look at just the stones there, or you see the palace itself. That I think is very important, I think. And of course, the reduced cost and mispriced risk. Sometimes rehabilitating high risk is assessed for developing countries to ensure it's not mispriced. That I think is very important. Sometimes you think that there's too much risk, so then mispriced, the cost becomes quite higher, and then they are not able to. So you're basically doing something that may not work from the very beginning. So I think costing has to be affordable. And strengthen local intermediaries. Sometimes you work with some experts from outside, but without involving the local intermediaries. I think that will also be very important, I think, to work with the local intermediaries. And focus, of course, on human security needs. Explicitly integrate human security, you know, like water, health, education, value addition. This, I think, is very important. Sometimes just going for just that money alone, I think we have to put some human element in the partnership. Expand the fiscal space of the governments, because like you know, in Bhutan's case, sometimes our there's not much fiscal space. So that's why we go through external commercial borrowings to expand to blended finance. So I think we would request the MDBs and banks to work through the fiscal space. And last, we are also looking at concessional financing. Concessionality not assessed only by the volume, but by the quality and affordability terms. The tenor, enhanced tenor, this helps. So I think along those lines, I would request our MDBs and partners so that it becomes win-win for both the developing country and the MDBs. Thank you
very much. So I'm hearing, again, you didn't say the word, but I'm hearing a lot between the lines about alignment. Alignment with national priorities, alignment with local communities' needs, and also that holistic view, which, in fact, Bhutan is known for in so many ways in the mindfulness context. Let me go to Madam Qureshi now. And Pakistan has worked with virtually every major multilateral development bank in Asia, including, of course, as we mentioned, the OPEC fund, across a large and very complex portfolio. So what has that experience taught you about how MDBs could join forces with one another, perhaps even more effectively than they are currently doing? And where do you see the greatest opportunity to deepen those partnerships for greater impact? This was, again, a point that came up in the opening plenary today. I'd be very curious to get your perspective.
Okay, thank you again. I would strongly endorse the viewpoint of His Excellency that the relationship should be that of a partnership with the development partners. There are a number of development partners, both bilaterals and multilaterals, which are functioning in Pakistan, including the OPEC fund. There are some challenges associated with their operations and working. Number one is related to alignment, the alignment with the national policies, the national economic plan. Secondly, the duplicity, as the development partners are working in a similar sector. So rather than having a comparative strength in each sector and taking the lead, so that has been a challenge. Then the predictability of assistance. Usually the framework agreements with these multilateral partners have been short-termed. Now we have taken some steps, which I will deliberate on that in a while. And then there has been another challenge that relates to the when there is a demand for any assistance during climate hit scenario, the assistance that is provided is though concessional, but often repurposed from another ongoing project. So these have been some of the challenges that we have been facing, and over the past 1 year, we have been working with our development partners, and the first and foremost that we have now in a stage where we are entering into long-term country partnership strategy. With the World Bank, initially it was for 3 years, now we have a 10-year country partnership strategy. Again, with ADB, we have a 5-year. And with the Islamic Development Bank, again, we have entered into a country partnership strategy. So we are progressing slowly with all development partners and the multi-development banks. In that very way, it assures the sectors that they are going to operate in, the predictability of the envelope that is going to be allocated to Pakistan. And then we also have worked on in the past few years on projects where we have encouraged the development partners having different comparative edge in different sectoral areas to come and either go for co-financing or parallel financing. So some of the development partners, like there's one project, ML1, it's a railway line project, and it's a top priority for the government presently. In that, we have engaged the Asian Development Bank, the AIIB, and the EIB, and other multilaterals are also joining. So that will be a combination of both co-financing and parallel financing. So these are some of the areas that we have worked to meet these challenges, and we are now hoping that this will address the challenges soon.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask Khadouri, when you wish, to pick up on some of those points in the context of an answer to my final question to you. Infrastructure, in fact, does amount to the largest single sector in the OPEC fund's portfolio. And under the Strategic Framework 2030, the institution has set a very ambitious target of $20 billion in cumulative commitments by 2030. How will the OPEC fund approach infrastructure financing at that scale, and where do partnerships figure in?
Thank you, Melinda. Maybe just to add some numbers to what you said. So as the President mentioned this morning, we did over $3.2 billion in commitments last year. 30% of that was in infrastructure. And none of that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for partnerships. It's no coincidence that our Golden Jubilee, it's titled as Where Partnership Empowers Progress. And just looking in the room, if we see here, we have partners DFI, such as FMO, an old partner. We have new partners such as FinDev. These are our partners who we work with together. We have commercial banks from Armenia to Central Africa to Kosovo who we work with to work with SMEs or to work with infrastructure. If it wasn't for these partnerships, these people who are in the hottest room in the building right now, but here for our 50th anniversary, we wouldn't be here today on that side. Quantifying the scale of that, if you look at the Arab Coordination Group, where we had the meeting of the heads of institutions yesterday, the Arab Coordination Group put together $26 billion in commitments last year. That's one of the top 3 financings groups in the world, across 735 countries. In Pakistan, as OPEC fund, we've done over 1.5 billion from sovereign to trade, and we've just launched our sovereign trade window to private sector. But this is all about partnering with the ACG, partnering with the country, partnering with the private sector. So for us, it has always been and will continue to be part of our DNA. And it's the only way, if we're going to achieve the huge numbers we were talking about before, that we're actually going to get there. So for us at the OPEC Fund, the way we approach partnerships, it's strategic. It's long-term partnerships. It's partnerships at every stage of, I'm not going to call it project cycles anymore. We're beyond calling it project cycles. It's in the infrastructure ecosystem. That's who we want to be and where we are.
Right. Thank you very much. Last word to the commercial banker on the panel who sees more directly, perhaps than anybody, where private capital actually goes and where it doesn't. So We've heard from governments, we've heard from development institutions about what they're doing to help close this infrastructure gap. As somebody who works at the sharp end of where those private investment decisions are made, is the ecosystem that Mr. Khadouri just referred to, is it moving fast enough, and what needs to change most urgently to mobilize additional private sector resources?
Well, to be honest, I think we are definitely moving in the right direction. I wouldn't say that there's no progress made. There is a lot of progress made. Like, take for example, in India, many years back, they have decided a very ambitious plan to build out renewable energy. And they have set very clear framework, tariff mechanism, and credible offtake. And they can take that to scale. So I think ecosystem is also, at this point in time, fairly bespoke to the country. I think we mentioned earlier that Asia is still fairly sort of fragmented. Each country is different. So I think the ecosystem is also very much bespoke to each country. To unlock more infrastructure investment as well as private capital. I think back to the original point, the fundamentals is that the project needs to be bankable as well as scalable. So I think it is very important that the government, the MDBs, together with the commercial banks together, we need to unlock that. So we need quite clear risk allocation to make that happen. I think in some economies in Asia, it is already happening. In some economies in other parts of Asia, I think there's still some work to be done. But overall, I think we are making good progress, and the partnership, the collaboration is very important.
Thank you very much to all of you. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. We have just 1 minute on the clock, so I will attempt the very briefest of summaries to tie together the strands of what we've heard. We've heard from governments that have been doing the hard work of designing investment-ready projects and putting into place policy frameworks that are truly enabling for different types of financial instruments and financing partners. We've heard the OPEC fund detailing what can be achieved by an institution that's deploying capital across the full development continuum, from project preparation all the way through to co-investment, with partnerships that are covering, I think, nearly 80% of your operations, if I'm not wrong. We've heard about hydropower structured to mobilize a very large share of private capital for every dollar of sovereign exposure. And we've learned that innovative tools, sound architecture, and engaged partnerships are mobilizing private sector capital in ways and at a scale that would have been unimaginable not too long ago. So Asia's infrastructure gap persists, but clearly all of you are building bridges in the literal, but especially in the figurative sense, that do reduce the size of that gap and that forge new connections between communities that very badly need them in a dramatically changing environment. Thank you very much for the work that you're doing and for your contributions to this panel. And dear guests, the forum now continues right away in plenary with a closing session on transforming development, digital innovation, and partnerships for impact. I wish everyone safe homeward journeys, and I hope that our paths will cross again soon. Thanks for your attention.